Morning, everybody.
Hey, Jake, I'll start. I've got a question. I'm with Sports Radio 810 WHB, and I'm asking this on behalf of Nate Bukaty, and he wants to know the New Orleans Pelicans organization when Hurricane Katrina hit, although a different tragedy than what we're experiencing now with the pandemic. What did you learn from that experience, and any similarities or differences in terms of handling that from an organization's perspective?
Yeah, clearly a different set of circumstances, but interestingly enough, I think a lot to learn from the impact on the team, and in that case, the city, right? Clearly, a hurricane impacting a region versus the global pandemic different. But it's interesting looking back. That was the start of my career. I was on the sales team there, selling tickets for the team, and certainly have crossed the full spectrum into the CEO world now. But it was helpful, right? I've looked back on that. I think transparency from the organization was important. As a young kid out of college, it was interesting. You don't know anything, right? You're nervous. What's happening? What are we going to have jobs? Are we going to have a team? I give the leadership there a lot of credit in terms of just being transparent with us about, hey, here's what's happening. We ended up moving to Orlando to sell for the Magic for 3 weeks while we figured out where we were going, and ultimately landed in OKC. For me, I think sometimes the unknown is the scariest part for folks, and we don't have a lot of answers right now, right? We're all going through this together. I've told everyone that there's no playbook for this, so we're trying to figure out as we go and make the best decisions for the organization. And clearly, in our case, you've got a league driving a lot of the decision. But yeah, interesting. I'd say 2 tragedies are enough for my lifetime, so hopefully this is the last one we all have to go through. But certainly some learnings to take away from there, and we'll see. Hopefully, I've tried to channel that to help us kind of navigate our way through this.
Jake, you said not a lot of answers right now, right? So like, what is it? How's it work with you and the league? Have you guys been through numerous different scenarios, and you kind of start and then you have to stop and back up, or is it just a pure holding pattern of sitting and waiting?
Yeah. Sure, and I've lost track of the scenarios we've been through. And I don't ever want to do a Zoom call after this thing ends the rest of my life. That's no disrespect to any of you all. I like all of you guys. But I think that's part of the challenge, right? It's changed so much. I mean, look back 2 weeks ago, right? We didn't have state reopening plans. We didn't know kind of a phase out timeline. You're starting to see all these come in now, particularly in our region, amongst others. So listen, I want to give the league a lot of credit to this. This is a scenario where they are in New York that is completely different than anywhere else in the country outside of maybe Seattle. And I think they've been really good at communication through this process, pulling the teams in for feedback. I'm on multiple league calls a day. I serve on multiple committees that we're trying to help navigate this from a team president standpoint. But ultimately, I think what we're trying to do is put all possibilities on the table so that when we know we can jump one way or the other, we're ready, and we're not trying to figure it out from scratch. So you've had everything from return to play in market, closed doors. What does that look like fading into fans, to a regional strategy of going to 1 city to 2 cities to 4 cities to try to get into an area where it's maybe not as impacted. So yeah, long-winded answer for you, but a lot of scenarios out there. Obviously, we're all kind of at the mercy of this thing as it progresses, or hopefully the declines, and then ultimately the governments are really driving the process now from the state and local level, and we've been in constant communication with them as well. But just trying to be prepared, right? As soon as we can do something, we want to be ready to go.
Is there a lead scenario right now? Is there, knowing full well that everything could change, right? Everything can be shut down, but is there kind of a direction you feel like you're pointing towards right now?
Not really. Again, this isn't really any inside scoop here. I just think the thought of getting back as soon as we can, when it's safe to do so. You're starting to see that with individual workouts this week, which hopefully then transition into group workouts, which then hopefully transition into likely closed door games to start it off. I think makes the most sense. Again, that's not any directive. That's just me as you've looked at, both the political nature of it and the timelines and everything else. I think we'd all like to get back to deliver sports to fans. And if that's via broadcast versus via in person to start off, I think we've all agreed that that's a scenario we'd be supportive of. But outside of that, it's so hard, right? You look at Kansas City. I think we could be ready to play closed doors and do group trainings in a month to 6 weeks maybe, right? And again, it may be aggressive, but you're not going to have that on the coast. So I think part of the challenge from the league level is trying to figure out what the best route is that, for the entire league, because every market is going to be so different through this thing.
Jake, a question about the economic impact. Do you guys have a preliminary evaluation? How was the economic impact on Sporting KC and in general on the MLS?
Uh, Significant, right? Not just for us. I mean, you look at any of these leagues that are, baseball is in the same boat right now, right? I think you've got a model where, particularly in MLS, we're a lot heavier reliable on the local revenues than maybe in NFL, where you've got the massive TV broadcast, where if you're playing closed door in the NFL, you're still going to have a significant portion of your revenues coming from the national broadcast. Although we've got a great deal with ESPN and Fox, and they've been awesome partners, we're just not at the same magnitude. So it's significant for us locally as a team, and we're looking at a very significant loss if we don't be able to play games this year, and that's not any breaking news. I mean, you cut off our revenue streams and you cut off the ability to play games where we're still having all the expenses that come with running a building and paying players and staff and everything else. It's a challenge, but I give our group credit. They've been very supportive through this process, and I think the league in general has the understanding that the sooner we can get back and start realizing some of the broadcast and sponsorship revenues, at least we can kind of check the box on some of those. But yeah, it's going to be a significant impact for us as well.
41.
As the rest of the league.
Wondering how individual workouts are going today, how they have gone, if you've got an update at all, and just the impetus behind starting those now.
Yeah, it was kind of like, kids on Christmas showing up to presents under the tree. I think getting back, everyone was super excited to just be there doing something, right? So very well received, very exciting for the guys to get back out there and start at least doing anything right outside of their home workouts that they've been confined to. So listen, we got a long road back through this thing, but I think anytime you can have some positive momentum like we did today with guys getting back to a soccer pitch and running around, it was a great start. So exciting to at least have something to grasp onto.
Can you quickly explain the logistics of it all? Are they spaced out a certain way? What are they doing? How do these things work?
Yeah, so one, I give Peter and his staff a ton of credit. They've been the league leaders on this thing, and frankly have set the protocol for the rest of the league to follow. So kudos to Peter and company for working hard to get this thing ready. Basically, think of 4 quadrants on the pitch, divided up equally. The guys then can do the individual workouts. There's a million protocol that would take the rest of this call if I walked you through everything that we have. But ultimately, safety at the forefront, from everything from them showing up to social distancing on the way in to making sure it's one at a time as they're coming on and off the pitch. Even to the extent if the ball crosses from one quadrant to the other guy can't kick it back. That guy's going to run over and get it. So really have tried to eliminate any contact, any cross contamination with any of the guys. And so we're probably way over the top on that, but clearly that's going to be the most important piece of this thing, is making sure that the players and staff are safe through this process. Because if we don't get this part right, then going into a smaller group session down the road is just going to even be more delayed. So far, so good.
Jake, you didn't mention anything about testing. Are you doing testing? Do you have tests for everybody that's involved?
We don't have tests for everyone yet. We're trying to secure tests. Ultimately, if we get back to the group stage, that'll be completely critical. We cannot go back to any type of group training until we have testing. But I believe right now, with the individual workout and having no interaction with anyone else and keeping everyone distanced, we have not done tests. And
it sounds like you don't have like a date, or the league hasn't said, hey, we've got them, they're coming. That's still just an unknown?
Yeah, correct.
I'm going to keep firing, so I apologize if somebody else is trying to jump in. Go for it. But a lot of the leagues are talking about, kind of hub playing, the Disney and Vegas plan for NBA and everything with Pinnacle and the incredible facility you've got there. Is there conversations about kind of a hub startup, and is Kansas City perhaps at the forefront of that?
Yeah, definitely conversations, and we've had good talks about being in the mix if that's the route they go down. I agree with you. I think facility-wise and infrastructure-wise, we're as well positioned as anyone. Clearly, Disney and Wide World of Sports has a massive complex, which is probably best suited. But listen, from a hotel standpoint, when you got the downtown hotels with the Lowe's coming on board, which is brand new and no one's been in there, we've got plenty of hotel space if we needed it. Clearly out at the Legends as well, if you want to be in proximity to the facilities. But between, Swope, between Pinnacle, we've got, I think, plenty of surface to train on. And that's just counting grass, right? If you expand it out to the Wyandotte Sports Complex, to the Overland Park Shields Complex, I mean, we can definitely do it. We've had great conversations with the league. No indication of where we would be in the hierarchy there, but we're certainly in the consideration set if they decide to go to kind of a multi-city type of setup.
Jake, to be considered for something like what are some of the boxes that Kansas City has to check in order to be not just a front runner in something like that, but even considered as a location?
Yeah, well, so I think there's the standard checklist, right? Which is, can you literally host the teams? Can you do the training? Do you have game-ready facilities to play in? And we check all those boxes in a big way. I think these are good news when you look back on all the international games we've hosted. When you go back to 13 with All-Star and MLS Cup, I think we've just got a good history with the league on big events and working with the league on those. So I think there's the built-in trust factor that this group can pull it off. And I give credit to Cliff and the ownership group. They've been forefront on driving this thing. I mean, Cliff's on the executive committee with the league, so he's obviously beating the drum at every chance he gets for us. But I think the league has complete confidence. We've never had an event here that's been anything other than exceptional in their eyes, and so I think that carries a lot of weight in the decision making. And then, like I said, the we have to offer from training and games.
Hello, Jake. This is Salvador Perez at Mexico. To ask you your perception, your thoughts about a player like Alan Pulido. This is his first season at MLS, but your perception about Alan Pulido.
My perception is I wish we would have played more games because he was on a good goal scoring run there when we had to halt it. But I give Pulido a ton of credit. I think his integration into the team. Clearly, you saw the results on the two matches that we played this year. But I mean, what you don't see is I think just the culture piece that he brings and the leadership with the group, and he's fit in so well. I think sometimes you're nervous about bringing in a big name player and what that impact will be, and their attitude and ego, and there's none of that with him. He's been exceptional from a training standpoint to integrate into the team. And my only regret is we've only seen him on the pitch for 180 minutes so far.
His work on pitch of Alan Pulido can be a step to look for more Mexican players for the next season, for the next transfer window, or not?
Yeah, I think so. Listen, I think you guys have heard Peter talk about this enough. I don't think we're focused on Mexican players or South American players or European players. I think Peter focuses on the players that he feels like are going to fit into the system well and mesh. And so, yeah, if it's whether that's within Mexico or another league, I think as long as they fit that mold that our guys are looking for, then we're very open to it. But listen, you've seen the Mexican players come into the league the last couple of years, and it's clear the impact that they've had, particularly up front. So, yeah, I think a good pipeline right now and the results to go with it.
Besides the MLS team, what is the transition on the USL and the Sporting Kansas City too? And how is the impact of the new system of development academy? I mean, the development academy shut down, and do you have any idea of how we're going to continue the development program on Sporting Kansas City? Yeah,
so on the USL front, I think largely following the league of MLS, in a very similar process as MLS is right now in terms of trying to evaluate what the next steps look like. They've basically followed lockstep with MLS decision making. So I would imagine as we get to a point where we can resume some sort of play, you'll see USL follow suit soon after that. Again, as you go into the minor leagues for any sport, you're going to be, we're very reliant on local revenue. They are extremely reliant on local revenues, right? So it hurts those leagues even more. In terms of the DA and that announcement by the Federation, I guess a week or two, so I lose track of days and weeks and everything else in this situation. But listen, I think we look at that as an opportunity, right? I think can we step in as a league and help establish what that DA was meant to be and delivered for the academy teams. And clearly we're extremely invested in the youth space. We feel passionately that that's a path that we are highly invested and feel great about the future in. So Peter's been heavily involved from league level. MLS is really looking at that as how do we improve that and step up the game when we can come back, but definitely a void right now, which we're trying to step into.
Jake, I know NBA and NHL, it's been widely reported their revenue, their TV revenue, like 2/3 of it is in the playoffs, right? The regular season's about 1/3 of their revenue. None of my business might be your answer to this, but how does the TV revenue stack up? In other words, like is the playoffs carry the weight like it does in other sports, or is it more evenly dispersed?
Yeah, more evenly. Without going into details, that's a easy answer for you there. But again, you're talking about such a difference. Again, don't quote me on exact numbers, but I think NBA is something like 4.2 billion at this point. NFL is in the sevens, I believe. I mean, and NHL is less than NBA, but I mean, there's such a massive amount that they put into the playoff side of things, and frankly, their structure is just so different, right? NHL, NBA, you've got 7-game series. I mean, the playoffs go on for 2 months, whereas our setup is a little bit quicker and just different. So it's a different distribution of how the revenue is accounted for.
Is there, listen, I know safety's everyone's priority, but do you have to resist the urge? I mean, people are so thirsty for sports. If you can get back quickly, right? If you can be the first one back and have center stage. I mean, obviously NASCAR, different world, right? Different sport, but they're pushing the envelope as fast as they can to get back on and be the one thing. Is there a temptation there? Do you have to kind of check yourself and say, well, let's slow down, because it would be a tremendous business opportunity if you were the only league?
Yeah, throughout the temptation, I'd say it's something we're driving for, right? I think if you can be the first one back in an area where outside of the Last Dance every week, you don't really have a lot of sports content to look forward to. It's definitely would be something we would be extremely interested in being the first ones back if we can pull that off. But I mean, it's it comes down to the safety protocol. Can we get the testing? Can we get the results? Can we do all the things that we need to make sure that we're not rushing it back? Because if you rush it back and you screw it up, then you're going to be the last ones back, not the first. So clearly a methodical approach as we've kind of looked towards that.
You have the K-League coming back this Friday in Korea. Next week, it looks like the Bundesliga might be coming back. How much attention are MLS going to be paying to those leagues, just to see how they're going? Because Germany's obviously had some issues with testing of the players in the first few days back at training.
Yeah, we've been in contact with everyone, right, from all the soccer leagues around the country, and frankly, from a domestic standpoint, we're having constant discussions with all the sports leagues, right? So I give the commissioner and his office a lot of credit. I mean, they're talking to the NBA, the NHL. I mean, this is a great example of, although we all compete for dollars on some level from a league standpoint, this is a time where you've really seen, in my view, the leagues come together to try to work together to figure this out, because again, no one has the answers. We're all looking at what the best way forward is. And so definitely a sharing of ideas, definitely a sharing of what's worked, what isn't. Listen, I'll be interested to see. I read the news on the German league this morning, and listen, I think that's good to just watch and monitor and see how it goes. And ultimately we'll have some learnings from that, good or bad.
The last time we all got to speak with you was more exciting times when we were going through the new stadium renovations on Media Day. I know the team was working really hard to get everything up and ready for the first home game. You only got one home game to test all those things out. Have there been any modifications made to any of those, or is everything kind of on hold on that front?
Yeah, I miss those days, Allie. I wish we were back there now. Listen, after game one, we had all new concessions, as you guys are aware, all new infrastructure put in, and we had a lot of learnings with a very full building on a great night. And we had a lot of adjustments that we thought we had a lot of time because we had 3 weeks to our next home match, and turns out we're going to have a lot more time than that. But we definitely did some modifications. We had to change a couple of things around. And so knock on wood, whenever we are back at Children's Mercy Park, I think we'll be ready to go and had some learnings from that first game. But it was great. I'm glad we got one in at least, because that was a fun night.
Has there been any conversation about, how far back you can move the season? I know you guys were just getting started, but is there a drop dead date? Is there talk of, just shoving it back? And is there a point where you would just say, okay, 2020 is over?
Yeah, to start at the end, it would have to be. It'd be really bad if we just threw in the towel on 2020. I just think that there's so much opportunity to get games in. I mean, frankly, if we could start in mid-June, and you've got the date out there of June 8th, which at this point, who knows what that'll look like? But we could play a full season if we started in the next month. Will that happen? Who knows? I think as long as we could get something going on by late summer or early fall, we could put together some semblance of a season. Clearly, you're not going to get all 34 games in at that point in time. But for us, it's extremely important to do. You got to change a bunch of things in that scenario, right? Even right now, if we started playing, you're probably looking at a different setup for Open Cup, whether that's, do we play reserves? How do we handle that? You've got some of these competitions that you'd have to create some space for MLS matches being the priority. But short answer is we've looked at all those scenarios, and as soon as we can get going, I think we could still get the whole season in right now if we start in June, and as we go kind of 30 days further and further down, you start to clip some games off. But ultimately, we're going to do our best to get as many games in as possible, even if that's not until later in the summer or fall.
Question about the summer transfer window, and with everything going on with the pandemic, do you and Peter and Sporting feel like you could get a lot of value potentially with a player during that time that you might have had your eye on, or how do you guys anticipate that window playing out for Sporting this year?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a hard one to answer, right? I think, listen, it's going to be a buyer's market. I think we all feel like whenever we can get back out there, the reality is how many buyers are you going to have based on the financial situation of where the clubs come out of. So we've talked about it. I think we're always opportunistic on these things. And I think if there's a situation where we've had our eye on somebody that makes sense and we can go get a great deal on, it's definitely discussions we've had both with obviously on Peter's side and with the ownership as well.
Hey, Jake, two more questions. First of all, the coronavirus in the economical part can affect the December transfer window, or you don't look like that?
I think it could, right? We're kind of just at the whim of FIFA and what comes down with kind of the rulings internationally on that. But I think it'll have some impact, right? It feels like without anything happening right now, and then the majority of the leagues, that there's going to have to be a few things that change. So TBD, but that one is firmly out of our control.
Another question. Looking to the proposal in Mexico, the idea of a North American league with Liga MX and MLS, what do you think about that?
Yeah, listen, I think anything to continue to grow the game, for us here in North America is a good thing. I think there's a long way off for that becoming a reality at this point in time, but we've had a great relationship with them. I think the league, they've been fantastic partners to work with as we've had matches, and you've seen kind of the new tournament come up last year, and Campeones Cup and a couple other things. So you're starting to see some of the integration. Hard to tell if you could merge both leagues together, and there's a lot you'd have to work through there. But yeah, again, something that's been good to explore and see long term if it makes sense.
A benefit for both leagues?
I would think so, right? I mean, listen, I'm gonna be frank. I'm not really in the middle of those conversations from the league level, so hard for me to give you a bunch of context on that one. Other than I think, like anything, if you think there's an opportunity, it's worth vetting out, and it may produce fruit, it may not. But yeah, and especially in the midst of the COVID-19 that we're in, I don't know where those discussions would be from a league standpoint.
Thank you.
Yep.
One last one. It's kind of trivial, but in this day and age, I know one of the conversations that always comes up is about charter flights, right? And how much you can and can't, and flying commercially and everything. Clearly, you can, control the environment a lot more on a charter flight than flying commercially. Is that something that's coming up and maybe changing? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, you saw it even at the very beginning of this thing as we were kind of going into week 3 of the season, where they had basically thrown those rules out the window and said, we're going to charter everything moving forward. So I think if we come back in any capacity and we're playing in cities this year, you'll see charters across the board.